Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm a second-year med student, and I'm going to try and tackle the autonomic nervous system drugs. And that's a big task, so this is going to be divided up over 4 lectures. And so the first one is going to cover the functions of the receptors and kind of just an overview of the model we're going to use is the eye. So this is going to, in the end, the last video we'll talk about the physiology and pathophysiology with glaucoma and how the drugs interact with that. And then our 2 middle videos will be, the second one will cover the sympathetic drugs and kind of walk you through that. And then the third video will cover the parasympathetic drugs and what that all entails. So you're going to need a first aid for this because you're going to want to follow along. And the pages I'm going to use, I'm using 2013. The pages I'm going to start off with for right now are on 231, 232, and then 438 has an eye diagram. So I'm going to give you my cheat sheet eye first. You're going to want to draw this for how to remember which receptors will affect the eye, because it's really confusing between alpha, beta, muscarinics, who does what. This is a really easy way to remember it, and it's really easy to draw, so just enjoy. Here we go. So it starts off with, we do draw an alpha, okay, and this will represent sort of the inner iris there, and then we're drawing an eye. I guess I should probably, I'm going to show you the receptors as eyes, so this is going to be really, this is going to be functional here. So alright, so we're going to draw, that's one eye, right, and we're going to draw another eye right next to it, right, because you have 2 of them, okay, and then this is a B right here. See, it comes down, that's a B on its side, okay. And so let me just stop right here and just point out what we drew. So we've got this alpha and a circle around it. That represents the iris, okay? And then this other circle that I'm showing encircling everything, it's encircling everything. This would be your ciliary muscle that you know is technically encircling the lens. And then you're going to want to draw yourself well, that could be confusing. A lens within your alphas, and the way to remember what muscarinic receptors do is on one of them you're going to want to draw from your B a little M here coming in at the lens, and over here just to represent 2 different concepts, I draw an M on the outside, kind of hitting the sides of my outer iris. So if you want to color in the iris so you can see that, and I don't know, it gives you some perspective there, but this would be right our iris. And so just and then to remember what the orders are, it's really easy. Body made it really easy. We have alpha, beta, and muscarinic. So in an alphabetical order, it's alpha 1, beta 2, and muscarinic receptor 3. And we're going to go into the receptors more, but this is just for the eye model later, and we'll do it again later. But I'm going to use this to also help highlight what some of the functions are as we go down the line and hit all the receptors. So hopefully you've copied this already, and so you can refer to it when I refer to it later, because I'm going to erase this. But so you kind of have an alpha representing the inner, or you can make it the outer part of the iris, whichever one, right? And that's going to be involved in dilating the pupil. We have and we're going to add to this image. See, I keep forgetting my own image, so this is going to be a problem. But the other things I like to draw, because there's other regulatory effects, this is like the basic drawing. Then you're going to add, it's an eye, right? So it's crying a bit. So I like to draw a little B down here as like 2 little teardrops coming off of it. And then I draw a little line with a curly Q kind of going off. and that's another alpha if you turn your head. So why is that? Well, all right, let's walk through this drawing now. Now it's complete. We draw our two little tear things and the alpha curlicue, right? So now it's complete. Now you should have it. Nothing changed. It's still alpha 1, beta 2, muscarinic 3, but it all fits. So what was alpha? Alpha 1 is the dilator, and then we represent that by the iris, the pupil, and we show the this curlicue out here is also alpha 1, and that's just the the vasoconstrictive properties of alpha 1 you're probably already familiar with sympathetics. And then the beta going around the eyes, this represents the ciliary muscle. So it represents the muscles when it's relaxed, and then the tear things. Obviously, aqueous humor is not your tears. That's a different gland. But the aqueous humor, just a liquid product. That's what beta 2 makes. It makes aqueous humor with the ciliary body. So body beta doing that. And then the muscarinic receptors are kind of like your zonule fibers. So when on the left diagram, when those M's contract, that's the zonule fibers relaxing. Well, how do we relax zonule fibers? We constrict the ciliary muscle. So muscarinics constrict the ciliary muscle, and we're drawing it like on the outside of the pupil. So it's like when the muscarinic receptor contracts, it squeezes the iris, so that it causes a pupillary constriction. So that's how I remember those functions, just as it relates to the eye. And we're going to go back over this again when we do all the functions of alpha and beta, but this is going to be our model for later. So just hopefully you wrote that down, and you can refer back to it as we go. All right, so that's that. Now, for the next thing, we're just going to do on page 231 the kiss and kick till you're sick of sex. So how does that all work itself out? So remember, kiss, kick, you're sick of sex. All right? And so it goes kind of in alphabetical order. You've got alpha would be first. So it's alpha 1, then alpha 2, then beta 1, then beta 2, then that's a sympathetic system. Then we got, sympathetics can't do anything without the parasympathetics. Then we do M1. Oh, I'm sorry. My lines are going off out of order. M1, then M2, then M3. And then if you can't remember, well, is it dopamine next? Is it histamine next? Is it vasopressin? Because you decided to memorize this in an order instead of trying to logically reason it out like we're about to. If you've paid attention to our striatal motor cortex lecture, you know that dopamine has an inhibitory one. So that's the only I left. So that must be D2, which must mean that this is D1. And then these are QS, so it really doesn't matter whether you do histamine or and then vasopressin. If you memorize those are the same things. They have the same V1, V2 kind of thing going on. Now, what's the function of these guys? I'm just going to talk you through it. You just look at the paper, and hopefully this will make sense. So, alpha 1, right? We know is a peripheral constrictor, and but it's hard to remember maybe where it works. Even though what you really have to understand though is that that Q, anything with a Q, as they show you in the bottom of that page, anything with a Q triggers calcium influx. So that's going to have to be some sort of motor activity anyway. So the Q is a motor activity, so it does all the motor activity of alpha. It's vasoconstriction. But if you want to remember all the little details that are in there, I like to think of this as representing a certain syndrome. So if anyone remembers the mnemonic for Reiter's syndrome, that reactive arthritis, can't see, pee, or climb a tree, that gets you 3 out of 4 of them because you can't see because it'll dilate the eye, you can't pee because it constricts your sphincter, and you can't climb a tree because well, you can climb a tree. So actually this is a little bit different. It's you can't see, pee, but you can climb a tree, and you can't eat though because that's going to also inhibit the intestinal muscle contraction, peristalsis, right? And that's sympathetics. That all makes sense. I mean, you could probably infer all of this, but if you want to really memorize every little thing, I think of Reiter syndrome. And then alpha 2, it's got the I, so any I, it's going to be inhibitory. And alpha 2 is our central inhibitor that we're going to use to knock down centrally. And but it also has some not gland components, but if you think about alpha 2, whenever you say alpha 2, everything's down, right? We use alpha 2 to drop blood pressure. Alpha 2, later on in one of the other lectures, we'll talk about alpha 2 blocker being used to treat depression. So alpha 2 activity is always down. Even when you block it, it's down, because one of the effects of the blocker, which we'll talk about later, is sedation. So whenever you're dealing with alpha 2, everything is going down. Doesn't matter if you're stimulating it, you're blocking it, you're messing with alpha 2, it has some sort of sedative effect. So alpha 2 kind of represents like a parasympathetic response, you know, a calm state, a fed state. And so alpha 2 increases insulin, right? When we think about the calm, fed state, we need to raise insulin. So it raises insulin, and by extension, as we know, insulin impedes that hormone-sensitive lipase, so lipolysis is decreased in it. And then the only way I kind of think about this, the increase in platelet aggregation is like, right, if it's shutting everything down, the flow is kind of down. When we have stasis, right, when stasis, we have clotting. So it's like alpha 2 slows things down, there's stasis, there's platelet aggregation, increased platelet aggregation with alpha 2. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. And then we got beta 1, right? So beta 1 is a stimulatory, and so it if it's stimulating, then it's going to stimulate the heart, right? It's ionotropic, chronotropic, all that jazz, and that's our main heart one. And I tend to forget what its other function is. So again, trying to think of a syndrome that represents beta 1, I use cardiorenal syndrome. So I say it's something with the heart and the kidney. So it raises like the heart ionotricity, chronotricity, and it raises renin secretion. So there's beta 1 I used a syndrome, and alpha 1 I used a syndrome. So alpha 1 syndrome we used Reiter's, and beta 1 syndrome we used cardiorenal syndrome. So that's it, to kind of keep those together. And then beta 2, right? Beta 2 is also has an S. So beta 2, what did that do? Well, hopefully in your pulmonary modules, they really stress this idea, right? When we want to, we don't want to compromise our respiratory system, so we try and avoid inhibiting the beta 2, right? Because beta 2 is vasodilatory, and so it's like a weak beta 1. So I mean, we don't really consider its effects on the heart because whatever it does, beta 1 does it better. So technically, it does do that. Everything that beta 1 can do, but at a weaker level. But what it stands out is it's beta 2, it's vasodilatory. And I want you to kind of think about alpha 2 and beta 2 as sort of being competing siblings, okay? They kind of work against each other when it comes to the state of things. So beta 2, well, alpha 2 tries to shut things down. Beta 2 is trying to get the sympathetic system going a bit. So if we think about sympathetic response, I need to get moving. This is the fasting state. This is the moving state. This is the exercising state, right? So this is going to be a decrease in insulin, and thereby extension, an increase in lipolysis. And then, if we remember our eye drawing, we had beta 2, right? Because when alpha 1, beta 2, M3, beta 2 increases aqueous production, and it relaxes the ciliary body, which we'll get into the physiology of that later. But so that's so you can remember that. And then muscarinic 1, we're not dealing with the muscarinic receptors. I just think mind over matter. So M1 does the CNS and enteric system because that's like the thinking part, and it's got a Q, so it has the motor activity because technically it's doing the peristalsis. And then M2 is inhibitory, and if you think about it, we had all this cardio effects with the heart, right? The betas were working there. So wherever sympathetics go, parasympathetics kind of need to follow. That's usually the behavior. So the beta, so the muscarinic 2 is going to be the parasympathetic response to the heart. And remember, it only innervates the sinoatrial node, I think. Someone told me that. So There's a fun little fact. Whereas sympathetics innervated the whole heart, I believe. And then muscarinic 3 is kind of the catch-all. So it's everything that parasympathetic should be doing that we didn't already cover. So if we did the mind, and so we did the CNS and enteric nervous system kind of thing, and we did the heart, then muscarinic 3 is going to do bronchoconstriction. It's it's going to do the bladder. It's going to do, I'm sorry, I have to read. Can't do this all off the top of my head. Peristalsis. No. It does do peristalsis. I lied. M1 does not do peristalsis. It's involved in the enteric nervous system. It does not do peristalsis. This is probably important to know for a really esoteric question. Anyway, and then right in our diagram, I got to remember the diagram. M3 was the eyes. So it does all of it. It does the pupil constriction, and it does the zonule fibers would be constricted. So it must do ciliary muscle constriction. So that's M3. I think I covered all of that, and then the gland, the gland secretions. It's the catch-all. So if anything's parasympathetics and it doesn't already cover the heart or the CNS and enteric nervous system, but not peristalsis, then it's going to be an M3 receptor. So there, clearing that up. Sorry for that screw up. And then dopamine. So dopamine, if you remember D2 from our striatal cortex, you already know what that's going to do in the CNS in terms of getting the body to move from the substantia nigra. But the dopamine 1, obviously, again, so you know where that does. You know that it has a CNS effect too. That's not listed in that part of first aid. And then it talks about the kidneys. So the kidney kind of needs a way of protecting itself, and so it kind of latched onto this neurotransmitter of dopamine, which will relax the smooth muscles of the vasculature. So if that dilates, then that will increase flow to the kidney. So, and this will be important pharmacologically when we're talking about renal perfusion later, and how we can protect it in certain circumstances. So we'll think about that, and then what's next? Oh, histamine. So histamine, it's really just tease it apart. Just if you can remember that the gastric secretions are H2. They use the H2 inhibitors on that. Then everything else that you're used to thinking about histamine is H1. So the itching and coughing. Like if someone's got a cough, you can give antihistamine for that. So it does, right? And so nasobronchial mucus production and contraction of bronchioles, so that would all irritate coughing and then itching, right? So that's your classic allergies. Take an antihistamine, right? And then vasopressins. So literally, we're going to press the vaso. We're going to raise blood pressure. So like hear someone say, give them pressors, And I like the way of keeping it track in first aid. V2 would be the 2 kidneys, so that's going to be where it increases. So how can the kidneys increase pressure, right? Well, it retains more water. So wouldn't you know that it works in the collecting tubule to increase the permeability and absorption of water. And then V1 is like your vasculature vasopressor, and it does smooth muscle constriction similar to alpha 1, in that respect, in terms of their roles. So that was all of that. Those were the receptors. And then I'm going to cover the page. Oh, I'm sorry. I lost the page. So sorry, we did that. And then just remember the GS, anything that's GS, GI, cyclic AMP, Q was the calcium, should have some sort of motor activity. So real quick, shooting down. Alpha 1, Reiter syndrome, does CP? You can climb a tree because that does skeletal muscle, vascular smooth muscle contraction. Raise your blood pressure. Raise your blood pressure in this. Sorry, you can climb a tree. Depends how you want to look at it. You can climb a tree because you're raising your blood pressure, like it's getting you going. You can redirect it, or right, because it shuts down your enteric system kind of stuff, right, and it redirects blood to the muscles, and then the gut thing. and then alpha 2. Alpha 2 is always sedation. Everything's coming down. Everything's coming down in alpha 2. Beta 1 was the heart. The heart, cardiorenal syndrome. Heart, raised renin. Beta 2 was vasodilatory. I'm like, oh, that's right, beta 2, it had an antagonistic relation with alpha 2. What was that? Well, alpha 2 raised insulin, beta 2 knocked down insulin. Alpha 2, it slowed things down, stasis, raised platelet aggregation. Beta 2, it was on my eye diagram, alpha 1, beta 2, M3. Beta 2 was aqueous production and ciliary body relaxation. M1, right, mind over matter, CNS enteric, but not peristalsis. M2, that's my anti-heart. M3, it's a catch-all. Any gland secretions, any motor activities that's associated with parasympathetics, that's going to be M3. And in the eyes, pupillary constriction, zygomal fiber relaxation, so it must have been ciliary muscle constriction. And then dopamine 1 is for the kidney. It's the kidney's neurotransmitter thing, and it uses that to dilate the vessels. Dopamine 2, the CNS one that we talked about, striatal cortex. Histamine 1 is your classic allergies and coughing, and then histamine 2, gastric secretions, and then vasopressor 1 is the vascular one, and then vasopressin 2 is the kidney one, which will increase water and ADH absorption. So that is that. And moving on to now all the drugs that will affect these. So